They say family is the place you return to. For me, it was the first battlefield I chose to retreat from. My father despised my ideals. My younger brother pitied my career. They built an empire of money and power, while I served my country in silence. For 10 years, I have been a ghost in my own family. So why tonight did I decide to return to their party? Among those faces both familiar and strange, was it to see how rotten their prized empire had become from within? Or was it to pass a final judgment? To see if it was still worth saving? I stepped out of the car, adjusting my tie. The civilian suit felt like a borrowed uniform, a little tight in the shoulders and too loose at the waist. 10 years. I hadn't worn one of these in nearly 10 years. Tonight, my father's corporation, Meridian Apex, was hosting its annual gala. The stench of money and hypocrisy wafted from the hotel's main lobby. My mission tonight was simple: observe. This was the final phase of an 8-month-long investigation. On the surface, I was the prodigal son returned, a major general whom my family saw as nothing more than a grunt. A hostess in a sleek, silk uniform led me through the crowd. She glanced at my name tag, then at the seating chart, a flicker of confusion on her face. This way, Mr. Vance. This way was a round table tucked into the most obscure corner of the ballroom, near the restrooms and the fire exit. Perfect. An ideal position to observe without being noticed. I pulled out a chair. And Saturday, from here, I had a clear view of the stage and the VIP table, where my father, Theodore Vance, and my younger brother, Corbin, were seated. The whispers began. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Distant relatives, a few of my father's old business partners. Is that the eldest Vance son? Looks a bit rough. I heard he's still in the army. I poured myself a glass of water. It was cold, just like the air at this table. Then my father took the stage. He was the same as ever, tall, imposing in his custom-tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair meticulously styled. His voice boomed across the hall as he spoke of Meridian Apex's achievements, of impressive growth figures, and, of course, of his golden boy, Corbin. After lavishing praise on Corbin, he paused, his gaze drifting towards me. A half-smile played on his lips. And tonight, he said, his tone laced with sarcasm, we are delighted to welcome my eldest son, Gideon. After years of chasing fanciful ideals, he has finally made time to see what a real empire looks like. A few forced chuckles rippled through the tables. I didn't look up. I focused on the glass of water in my hand. I could feel Corbin's eyes on me from the VIP table. It was a mixed gaze of contempt and a flicker of unnamed anxiety he was trying to hide. He had no idea what I knew. He thought I was just his failed older brother, back with my tail between my legs. Let him think that. I raised the glass to my lips and took a sip. The ice-cold water sharpened my focus. The night was just beginning, and I wouldn't miss a thing. The party ended, and I accepted my mother's invitation to stay at the house for a few days. There was an urgency in her voice, as if my presence could somehow patch something up. My father didn't object. Corbin just shrugged. To them, I was a stranger, whose presence or absence made no difference. They didn't know I had orchestrated that invitation myself. I needed to get inside. The house was as vast and cold as I remembered. Marble floors swallowed the sound of my footsteps. There was no warmth, only the scent of wealth and loneliness. Breakfast the next morning was a silent affair. My father hid behind the financial pages, occasionally uttering a platitude about the value of $1. My mother avoided my gaze, her hands constantly rearranging the dishes on the table, though they were already perfectly placed. It was Corbin who broke the silence. He set his coffee cup down, looking at me with a patronizing air. "Hey, Gid," he said, feigning concern. "If you get tired of playing soldier, I can set you up with a position here. A nominal security consultant, maybe. You wouldn't have to do much, and the salary would be more than enough to live on." My mother quickly chimed in, her eyes full of hope. "Yes, Gid, that's a wonderful idea. You should think about settling down." She trailed off abruptly, catching my father's cold stare from behind his newspaper. She looked down, resuming her meaningless rearrangement of the breadbasket. It was a way to control me, to put me in a gilded cage where they could keep an eye on me. I smirked. "Thanks," I replied curtly. "I'll think about it." I left the table first. No one stopped me. I walked down the hall and up the stairs. I didn't go to the guest room I'd been assigned. Instead, I turned towards the west wing, where my old room was. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was no longer a bedroom. It had been converted into a storage room. Cardboard boxes were stacked high, old furniture draped in dusty sheets. The smell of mildew hit me, erasing the memory of fresh paper and model airplane glue that I once loved. I walked to a corner of the room where a more familiar stack of boxes Saturday. I didn't need to open them all, just the one on top. Inside, nestled on a bed of silk cloth, were my medals. The Silver Star, the Legion of Merit. Beside them, framed letters of commendation from the Department of Defense. My mother hadn't thrown them away. She had just hidden them here, in the dark, where no one could see them. I stared at them for a moment. I felt nothing in particular. They were just pieces of metal, sheets of paper. They were proof of a life my family had chosen to ignore. I gently closed the lid, leaving no fingerprints. The anger, if there was any, was cold as ice. It didn't make me tremble. It made me focus. I turned and walked out of the room. My mission here was clear. I wasn't back for recognition. I was back to end a war they didn't even know was being fought. That night, I didn't sleep. The luxurious guest room became my temporary command center. My military-grade laptop, heavily encrypted, sat silently on the desk. I connected it to the family's Wi-Fi network. As expected, its security was surprisingly lax. Overconfidence is a fatal flaw. Green lines of code scrolled across the screen. I didn't launch a direct assault on the Meridian Apex servers. That would be suicide. Instead, I looked for a back door. My father's personal laptop, the one he often used to work from home. It didn't take long to find it. I didn't break in. I simply planted a digital bug, a tiny surveillance program that would copy all synchronized data. Patience is a weapon. This investigation began 8 months ago, stemming from a low-level data leak at a naval base. It seemed harmless, but as my team dug deeper, we discovered a strange type of encryption, designed to look secure but which could be cracked with a specific key. The trail of that code, after weeks of tracing, led directly to a subcontractor for Meridian Apex. From there, a larger picture began to emerge. Money laundering through defense contracts, data manipulation, and possibly selling sensitive information to a foreign power. And now, Project Cypherfall, the biggest defense contract of the year, one that Meridian Apex desperately wanted. This wasn't just another contract. It was a trap. Or maybe a final test. I received an encrypted file from a trusted contact at the Pentagon. Inside was the draft of Cypherfall's technical proposal. I ran a custom-written analysis algorithm. A few minutes later, the results appeared. There it was. Buried deep within millions of lines of code was a perfectly disguised piece of malware, a sophisticated backdoor that would grant whoever held the key complete control of the system. I zoomed in on the document. At the bottom of the page, in the internal technical approval section, were two digital signatures. One belonged to the head of the engineering department, the other, clear and arrogant, Corbin Vance, Chief Financial Officer. I stared at the name. My brother wasn't smart enough to write this code himself. He was just a pawn, a greedy piece placed on the board. So, who was playing the game? I closed the laptop. I had what I needed. It was time for the next phase. Confrontation. 1 week later. The main boardroom at Meridian Apex headquarters. The air was thick with the smell of expensive leather and tension. The board members, key investors, and even a few reporters from major business journals were present. They were all here to witness the final review of Project Cypherfall. My father sat at the head of the table, his expression confident. Corbin was beside him, impeccably dressed, a smile on his face as if the contract were already his. The meeting began. After the usual empty presentations about potential and profit, the chairman of the board, Robert Callahan, stood up. Callahan was a former Undersecretary of Defense, an old Washington fox who had taken this seat after retirement. I had secretly contacted him 2 days prior. He didn't ask many questions, only said, "Do what you have to do, General. I'll clean up the rest." And now, Callahan announced, his voice formal, "We would like to introduce the representative from the Department of Defense, who has the final authority to approve this project." All eyes turned to the door. It swung open, and I walked in, not in a civilian suit, but in my Major General's dress uniform, my medals gleaming on my chest. 2 junior officers followed behind me, carrying secured briefcases. The room fell silent. I could hear someone drop a pen. My father froze, the glass of water in his hand suspended in midair. Corbin's face went pale, his smug smile cracking and then shattering. He stared at me, his eyes filled with disbelief and raw panic. I walked straight to the empty chair at the head of the table, directly opposite my father. As I passed Callahan, we exchanged a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. He was the only person in the room who wasn't surprised. I placed my briefcase on the table. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm. "Shall we begin?" Callahan cleared his throat, bringing the room back to focus. "Yes, General. The floor is yours." I wasted no time. I bypassed the financials, ignored the profit margins. I went straight for the technical specifications. "Page 57, Section 3.4, I said, my voice clear, my eyes not on the document but locked on Corbin. "The proposed encryption protocol is AES 256, standard. However, our team discovered a small modification in the source code library. A deliberate modification." I signaled to one of my officers. He connected a laptop to the large screen. Lines of code filled the display. "This modification," I continued, "creates a vulnerability, a backdoor that allows the entire data stream to be decrypted without the primary key. To put it simply, gentlemen, this is a system designed to be compromised." The silence in the room became heavy. The Meridian Apex engineers began to sweat. I projected another document onto the screen. It was the internal technical approval page. "CFO Vance," I said, using his title. "Your signature is on this document. As the one responsible for both financial and operational oversight, can you explain to the Department of Defense why you would approve a design that compromises national security?" Corbin was speechless. He stammered, his lips moving but no sound coming out. He looked to our father for help, but my father, for the first time in his life, had nothing to say. He just stared at me, his expression no longer one of contempt, but of the dawning horror of a man realizing the game has been completely upended. The meeting ended in controlled chaos. Callahan announced the project was being suspended for a technical review, deftly dismissing the investors and press. Once the room was empty, leaving only glass walls and heavy silence, he turned to my father. "Theodore, I believe you and your sons have things to discuss." With that, Callahan left, closing the heavy doors behind him. He had given me a clean battlefield. Now there were only 4 of us. Me, my father, my mother who had been summoned and now sat silently on a sofa, her face drained of all color, and Corbin. My father spoke first, his voice hoarse. "Gideon, what is this?" I didn't look at him. I looked at Corbin, who was huddled in a corner. "I never wanted to be the hero of this family," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "But when my family gets involved in federal crimes, I don't have a choice." My mother let out a sob, her hands flying to her mouth. My father flinched, seeing me for the first time not as his son, but as a foreign power, an officer of the law who had just entered his home. Corbin let out a bitter, desperate laugh. You're going to arrest me? Play the hero for Mom and Dad?" He tried to sound tough, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I didn't shake my head. I just met his gaze. "You think I spent 8 months on this? Flew halfway around the world just for something that simple, Corbin?" My voice lowered. "No, I came to save you." One last time, I took a step towards him. "You're not good enough to write that code. You just signed the paper. The person behind you, the one who gave you that design, he's setting you up to be the fall guy. When this blows up, he'll disappear. And you, as the CFO, with your signature on every document, you'll be the one left holding the bag. Treason. Corbin, no lawyer can get you out of that." I let the words hang in the air. I saw the last of Corbin's arrogance crumble, replaced by pure, animal fear. He looked from me to our father, searching for a salvation that wasn't there. "Who?" my father asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Who is behind this?" I turned back to him. "That's what I need Corbin to tell me." I looked back at my brother. It was checkmate. Now it was his move. Surrender, or be destroyed. Corbin didn't answer right away. He just stood there, leaning against the glass wall as if it were the only thing holding him up. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, broken only by my mother's choked sobs. My father sank into a chair, looking as if he'd aged a decade in a matter of minutes. The empire he'd spent his life building was on the verge of collapse, not from a competitor, but from a conspiracy within. Finally I spoke, breaking the silence. My voice remained even, offering no pity, only facts. "The mastermind isn't one of ours," I said, my eyes still fixed on Corbin. "He's from the foreign partner your company is working with to expand into the Asian market. Isn't he? He promised you a massive commission, a shortcut to impress Dad and prove yourself. He gave you the technical documents, and all you had to do was sign." Every word was a hammer blow against Corbin's last defenses. He slid down the wall to the floor, burying his head in his hands. I didn't know it was this serious," he mumbled. He said it was just a way to optimize the project. "Optimize?" I sneered. "By selling out national security?" I didn't need his answer. I already had it. I turned to my father. "You see? Your son isn't a traitor. He's just a greedy fool." I walked over to Corbin and crouched down in front of him. "Listen carefully," I said, my voice low enough for only the 2 of us to hear. "I'm offering you a way out. A deal. You give me everything you have, emails, call logs, documents, anything you have on this partner. Everything. In return, I will frame this to my superiors in a different light. He looked up, his eyes filled with suspicion. A different light? The story will be that you, as a responsible CFO, discovered irregularities and secretly cooperated with the Department of Defense to expose this plot. You'll be a whistleblower, not a criminal. Mom and Dad won't be implicated. Meridian Apex will face a fine for managerial oversight, and the real mastermind will take the fall for everything. I stood up. You have 24 hours. Make your choice. After that, this offer is off the table, and I will do my duty. Without exception. I didn't wait for his reply. I knew he would agree. Fear is a much stronger motivator than greed. As I walked past my mother, she grabbed my hand, her voice trembling. Gideon, thank you. I gently pulled my hand away. I haven't done anything yet, I said. This isn't over. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind a broken family and a chess game whose outcome I had already decided. But I knew the real enemy was still out there, and he wouldn't go down without a fight. I was right. The enemy didn't sit still. 20 hours after I made my offer, just as the clock struck midnight, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I answered. Gideon. Corbin's voice came through, shaking with panic. He knows. He knows I met with you. Stay calm, I said, my voice steady. Where are you? I don't know. He just called me. He said if I want our family left alone, I have to bring all the evidence to the P4 underground parking garage at the Meridian building. Alone. At 1 a.m. He said someone would be there to collect it. Gideon, what do I do? It's a trap. It was a trap, all right. The mastermind didn't want the evidence back. He wanted to silence the only witness who could testify against him. Listen to me, Corbin, I commanded. You are not going anywhere. Stay inside the house and lock all the doors. Do not answer the phone for anyone but me. Understood? Understood. Good. Send me everything you have through the secure channel I set up. Immediately. I'll handle the rest. I hung up. The plan had changed. The enemy had shown his hand. I didn't alert my team. This required speed and absolute silence. I checked the Sig Sauer pistol nestled in the holster hidden under my jacket. I was going to that meeting, but not as Corbin. The P4 underground garage was damp and empty, filled with the buzz of fluorescent lights. I didn't drive in. I took the fire escape stairs down, moving silently between the shadows of luxury cars. I found a perfect vantage point behind a large concrete pillar, allowing me to watch the entire area without being seen. At exactly 1 a.m., a black, unlicensed sedan rolled in slowly. It stopped in the middle of the parking lot. The door opened, and a tall figure emerged. He didn't scan the area nervously. His observation was professional. He kept one hand in his coat pocket. This wasn't some low-level thug. This was an assassin. He stood and waited. A few minutes passed. Realizing his target wasn't coming, he grew impatient. He pulled out his phone, likely to report in. That was my moment. I made no sound. I stepped out of the darkness, quiet as a ghost. Looking for me? I said, just loud enough for him to hear. He spun around, his hand instantly pulling a pistol fitted with a suppressor. But it was too late. I was already too close. I closed the distance, swatting his weapon aside with one hand while delivering a powerful elbow strike to his jaw with the other. He stumbled. I gave him no time to recover, using a swift arm-lock takedown to slam him to the ground. His pistol clattered nearby. I glanced at it, murmuring to myself, H&K, subsonic rounds. Definitely not an amateur. Then I pressed the muzzle of my own weapon to his temple. Talk, I growled, applying pressure. Who sent you? He didn't answer, just glared at me with pure hatred. But I didn't need his answer anymore. I had all the evidence from Corbin. This man was now just a loose end to tighten the noose. Weeks later, it all ended quietly, not with a bang, but with the cold, methodical turning of legal gears. With the evidence Corbin provided and the testimony from the assassin I captured, the operation was swift. The mastermind, a high-ranking board member, was arrested by FBI agents in his mahogany-paneled office. No perp walk for the cameras, no front-page scandal. Callahan had made sure it was handled discreetly to protect Meridian Apex's reputation. Justice was served, just without the fanfare. Corbin faced an internal hearing. He lost everything. His CFO title, his power, his license to work in the financial sector. He lost his career, but he kept his freedom. It was a steep price, but a fair one. I heard he enrolled in a systems security course at a small university, far from the glittering world of high finance. A new start? From zero. My father, Theodore Vance, also made his decision. He called a press conference and announced his resignation as CEO. Facing dozens of cameras, he didn't speak of conspiracies or place blame. He only said that he accepted full responsibility for the management oversights that allowed for misconduct to occur. At the end of his speech, he added one more line, looking directly into an unseen camera, and I would like to thank the brave individuals who stepped forward to protect the integrity and honor of this corporation. I watched the clip in my office at the Pentagon. It was his way of apologizing, I knew. My mother called a few times. I didn't answer. Not because I was angry. There just wasn't much left for us to say. Months passed. My life returned to its familiar rhythm. Classified briefings, cyber warfare operations, long nights, analyzing data. The Meridian Apex case became another file stamped, closed in my cabinet. Then one day, a small package arrived at the base. There was no return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting on the label. Inside, there was no letter, just an old photograph in a simple oak frame. It was a picture of Corbin and me as kids, maybe 7 or 8 years old, 2 skinny boys standing in front of our old house, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning, blissfully ignorant of empires and betrayal. I looked at the photo for a long time. I didn't smile. But the block of ice in my chest seemed to have thawed. Just a little. I placed the photo on the corner of my desk, next to top-secret military documents. It stood there, right beside the gray, ruggedized laptop, the innocent smiles in the wooden frame and the cold metal shell of a war machine. Past and present, it stood as a silent reminder that I had completed my mission for my country and for my family in the only way I knew how, the way of a soldier.